Welcome to a new wave of entrepreneurship. I'm Scott Sturt, founder and CEO of Venture for Canada and your host. The focus of this podcast is to hear from changemakers and young Canadian entrepreneurs to learn how they develop their entrepreneurial mindset and skills. In season 1, we'll be chatting with young Canadians about their entrepreneurial journey as Venture for Canada Fellow Alumni. I'm excited to dive into these conversations about how to foster your entrepreneurial mindset and drive. Hey, Ben, we're super excited to have you on our podcast, A New Wave of Entrepreneurship. Ben Winn is the Events and Community Manager at Catalyst Software, which is a leading customer success software that just raised $20 million investment funding. He's a 2016 Venture for Canada Fellow and the founder of CS in Focus, and a renowned expert in customer success and has done a ton of work in the field. So really excited to have you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on today, Ben.
Thank you for having me. It's great to see you and catch up and chat with you.
Agreed. So first kind of question for our listeners, can you describe a little bit about yourself?
A bit about myself. I love building relationships. I have very little patience. I just found out I'm celiac. Love startups. Been really glad that I went through the Venture for Canada program way back when, and it's been an amazing journey the last 5 years figuring out what customer success is, and that I loved it. And then finding my way to starting CS and Focus, and then sort of stumbling into this role at Catalyst, which is a mix of what I love on community building, what I love about customer success, and gives us the opportunity to eventually move to New York. So feel free to dig in on any of those, but I guess that's high level, a little bit about me.
That is a efficient overview. I appreciate it. So digging in deeper into your kind of journey into customer success, what was your first exposure into the customer success field? And then relatedly, why do you think you became passionate about that specific subject area?
Completely accidentally and but mostly by luck. So through Venture for Canada, I got an interview at a company called StatFlow, where there's a number of great fellows doing fantastic things. And when I interviewed with them, I was offered a sales role or a CS role, and not having any experience in sales, I was really scared of being in a sales role because I knew I'd have a quota and pressure and I'd have to be salesy, and I was picturing a car salesman. So I was like, oh, I really want the customer success role, not really knowing what that entailed. And they were like, great, that was a test. We wanted to make sure that we've had a lot of people saying they would take either role because they just want to work here, but you clearly know what you want. And I was like, yeah, totally. That's why I said that. But it worked out to be a really happy accident because that was my first role, kind of jumping into customer success, learning what it was in a B2B environment. And eventually that led to me joining Seamless MD, where I got to build out the customer success function, which was where a lot of my real learning and exploration happened, and what led to sort of everything that came from there.
Could you describe for our listeners, what is customer success? And in particular, in describing it, can you define and distinguish the difference between customer success and what people traditionally would think of customer support? And then likewise, how is customer success different than sales?
Sure. So simply put, customer service or customer support is responsible for fixing what is broken, and customer success is responsible for proactively driving customers' desired outcomes. So a customer service request would be, this is broken, please fix it. But a customer success request is, we've engaged your company to help us grow by 50% this year. Help us do that. And so it's the CSM's job to make sure that customer grows their revenue by 50% that year, or whatever it is that the desired outcome is. Similarly, the way I differentiate it from sales, the simplest way is, sales is responsible for conceptualizing the vision of what the software or what the company can do for the buyer. Customer success is responsible for executing that vision. So that's why there's often some tension between the two, because sales will be like, oh, this can solve everything for you. And then CS will get the customer who has all these expectations and they're responsible for executing it. And if there's not alignment around what's been promised and what can be delivered, there can be tension. But great companies have fantastic collaboration between those two departments.
What are some of the main metrics that customer success teams are generally assessed on?
The most important metric for customer success at a high level is NDR, which is net dollar retention. So that can be broken into, so that's basically the amount of money retained, the amount of dollars retained year to year. The best way to think about it is by breaking it into three smaller metrics, which are churn. So that's the amount of customers or dollars lost, retention, which is customers or dollars retained, and expansion or upsell, which is the additional dollars that are brought in from existing customers. So the best SaaS companies in the world, like Dropbox or Slack, or a lot of these leading ones, they have net dollar retention rates of around 140, 150%. So that means that even if their sales team sold no new customers over the course of a year, they would still grow their revenue by 50% because their current customer base is growing with them. So that's why net dollar retention rate is the most important thing.
That's a great business to be in. If your revenues can grow at that rate without selling any new clients, that's a pretty good situation to be in for a company.
That's why every company needs to be investing in customer success for that reason alone.
Do you find, in your experience working, through CS and Focus and working with a wide range of different tech companies and seeing how they have customer success, do you find that most technology companies view customer success as a cost center or as a revenue generator?
The best companies view it as a revenue generator, the ones that are doing really well, or the ones that are moving in that direction. But there's a lot of, I would say, larger companies that are just slower on the uptake. Because larger companies move slower, adapt slower. When you have a larger team, change management internally is a lot harder. Like I know people that are responsible for implementing customer success across all of Oracle or all of IBM. And it's like, if you have a 5,000, 10,000 person organization, it's hard to get buy-in for customer success and implement customer success practices and implement software and all this kind of stuff. Whereas if you're an early stage startup, and you're like 4 people or you're 50 people, much easier to kind of attend some webinars or read an ebook or talk to a CS professional, get it and implement something along those lines. So we're definitely trending in the right direction.
If you were a team lead of a customer success team and you were hiring a lot of kind of recent grads and building out kind of your customer success function, what are some of the traits that you would look for in hiring customer success managers?
There's probably 2 key things I would point to, because there's long lists and there's a million things you can go into and there's a lot of debate around this. But at the end of the day, the 2 things that I would screen for, which is also what I would screen for a community associate that I'm excited to be hiring soon, is flawless communication skills. Written, oral. The quickest way to lose anyone's trust, a client, a colleague, anyone, is to have spelling or grammatical errors in an email or in a message. So it might seem small, but that's the first thing I look for. And I'm not ashamed to say that I will and have rejected candidates sight unseen if there are spelling or grammatical errors in their outreach message to me, purely on that basis. The second is really strong relationship building skills. So you have to enjoy talking to people. Empathy comes naturally. They're confident giving presentations and putting themselves out there. CSMs, like really good CSMs, are just natural relationship builders. So I'd say those are kind of the 2 main pillars: communication and relationship building.
It's great advice. And I think that I definitely agree about I think high quality written and oral communication is increasingly essential in so many different roles. And I think that for a long time, people have appreciated that about oral communication. But for written communication, for a long time, it's often been undervalued. And it's a recognition that even if you're an engineer or you're in operations, like the ability to communicate and write succinct to the point emails or Slack messages is a very integral kind of skill. So on that point, if someone's listening and they're interested in breaking into the customer success field, they don't have any experience, they've never worked in customer success, what advice would you give them on how to prepare themselves for potentially working in a customer success role?
Great question. There's a lot you can do. The great thing about customer success is that everyone loves helping each other and everyone loves giving stuff away because we just want everyone to be successful. So there's a lot out there. So I would say go to csandfocus.com and check out the resources that are on there. Go to Catalyst, download our ebooks and take a skim through those. Look at our, go to Success Hacker. There you can get they do training on CSM certifications, and it's propelled or whatever the term is. You can do it at your own pace. I think it's for their level 1, it might be $50. But it gives you all that foundational knowledge you need to understand the lingo, understand, everything to get started in the customer success world and enter that interview kind of knowing exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think a lot things that recent grads can do just to educate themselves about in-demand jobs is partly through the internet, just Googling and learning initially. And different coffee chats and you learn on the fly. One of the things that's interesting is I think if you ask most 18, 19, 20-year-olds what a customer success manager is, they wouldn't know. It's one of those jobs that has kind of emerged that's new, right? And it's not like somebody gets a degree in customer success management from university.
Not yet. I'm working on it, but it's a good point. People don't know that it's a career option. If you told me when I was 18 that I could be paid a great salary to just build relationships with people and give presentations and be friendly, I would have laughed. That doesn't seem like something that you can get paid for because it doesn't feel like work. I always stressed because my older brother is an engineer. And so he had a very linear, tangible, very clear career path as to how he could be extremely successful with his skills. And so I was like, well, I'm not good at that. I've tried multiple times. I'm good at people and talking and making jokes and stuff like that, but who's going to pay me for that? Turns out there's a great job in tech that will pay you to do that, and that's customer success.
So you grew up in Ontario, and then you went to study at Mount Allison University, which is a liberal arts university in New Brunswick, which I actually incidentally visited for the first time back in December, and it is absolutely beautiful. Well, I had been there briefly before, but visited in depth in December.
You saw all really 4 streets?
Yeah, all 4 streets on down the little main street. It doesn't take too long. For our listeners' background, there's I think Mount Allison has maybe 2,000 students. It's pretty 2,500.
Yes,
it's pretty small.
It is petite.
So very petite. Yeah, that is a good, very artsy though, in a very definitely a town that has a lot going for it for being so small.
Yes.
So you study business there. You're in this small kind of liberal arts environment, and then transitioned into tech, into customer success. And there's lots of debate around liberal. I know you studied business, but it was within kind of a liberal arts institution, and I'm sure you would have had to take a lot of liberal arts courses. In what ways do you think that your experience at Mount Allison and attending a liberal arts university helped prepare you for what you do currently?
Well, I will say that. So there are a couple things I'll point out to, because I think I have a lot of conflicting views about post-secondary education and stuff like that. But there are a couple things that I will point out that were extremely valuable. One was a a class called People Skills in Business that was taught by Sandy McKeever, who I think he's a former consultant. We're still in touch. He's a brilliant guy. And he taught it, and it was all about, like I said, it's in the title, People Skills in Business. It was all about just how you interpersonal conflict and collaboration and strategic thinking and all the emotional intelligence, like, strengths finder and, all that kind of stuff that you don't think about being a part of business. Like, that's what he drilled in on, because we were getting enough of the finance and accounting and consumer behavior and all the kind of stuff that's just kind of run of the mill commerce courses. But his course was that. And the way he taught it was in these challenges. Every week there was either a lecture or a challenge, and they were all basically, they were based on like, oh, at Microsoft, when I consulted for them, they had this problem with hiring or with executives quitting or with whatever. And here's this creative solution that I did for them. And it would be something where it's like different cutout shapes of construction paper, and we have to make a certain shape with them as a team, but there's rules like you can't talk or you can't do X, Y, or Z. And so you have to pay attention to body language. And it was just brilliantly taught. So that course stayed with me, and I reuse. The other thing that I think is more of the umbrella term or the umbrella concept is just being in university and going through university. Especially, I worked almost 40 hours a week on top of my schoolwork all through school at Joey's. I don't know if you ate at Joey's when you visited, but is just getting in the rhythm of being able to work, like put your head down, do hard work, build that work ethic, be really disciplined about your approach to things. Like, I don't think I use almost 99% of what I learned. Sorry, Monet. Like I just don't use it every day. It wasn't specifically relevant, but the broader, lessons that I learned putting myself through university and working hard and meeting people and that kind of stuff, I do use all of that.
The human skills
Yes.
not as much the tactical ones. Yeah, it's something I reflect on as well, having studied foreign policy processes as my undergrad, and then doing things completely different. I took all these courses on Burmese politics, so I know a lot about the intricacies of different ethnic groups in Burma, but
Really
not that relevant to Venture for Canada. But to your point, writing regularly 20-30 page term papers, broadly analogous to grant writing and certain things that have to do at VFC. So your comments resonate with my
that's the umbrella stuff.
Yeah. Kind of shifting back to customer success for a minute is, can you describe to our listeners, what is a customer advisory board, and how can startups or just companies in general really build that kind of engaging relationships with their clients, where it goes beyond a monetary relationship and kind of a strategic one?
Your early customers are your most valuable. I'm sure every startup knows that. But you have to make sure you're using them to their full extent. I think a lot of times I see startups feel like they need to look like they have their shit together. But often if customers are buying you and you're an early stage startup, they know that you're not the dominant force in the industry that has everything figured out. They want to bet on an underdog. There's something about you that they like, and your functionality or your team, you have enough that you're able to solve their existing need, and they have faith that you'll be able to solve their future ones. So leverage the fact that they are your champions. And a great way to do that is with a customer advisory board, because it gives you an opportunity to be transparent around your product roadmap, what you plan on building and when and why, and getting their candid feedback on that, or getting their advice. Like, you can literally go to a customer that's your current customer and say, we want to attract more customers like you. And we want to better understand what channels we should be reaching out to them on. Are your peers on LinkedIn? Are they on Twitter? Are they on Facebook? Would you respond to an email to see a demo if it read like this, or if it had a meme in it, or if it had a video in it? Use them. Customers are often way more than happy to help. And I think that fear of coming across like you don't have everything figured out hampers a lot of startups from taking full advantage of that. So I definitely advise doing a customer advisory board very early on, getting candid feedback from customers and leveraging them to become champions and advocates.
I love the concept. At Venture for Canada, we're actually effective February this month. February 2021, we're launching an employer advisory council, which, while different contexts of space, it's about, are we listening to our the employers that we work with? Are we getting advice? Are we incorporating their feedback? And one thing I love about the concept that you describe is that it's important to create formalized processes to ensure that this feedback, that they're in it organically, it can happen, right? Like I'm sure even without a customer advisory board, some of this happens. But if you create a process, if you create that intention, there's so much more likelihood for there to be that higher level of engagement from a client.
Definitely. And I think the thing that people often forget about customers, or just people in general, is that the people that you hear from are the loudest people, who are the most confident and the most outspoken. So often, if something's wrong, you might have one customer that's particularly outspoken and will email you and be like, this isn't okay, you should be doing it this way. But the other 80-90%, they might have something to say, but they might not be confident in it, or they might just not have been asked. They might be waiting for you to ask them. So taking that opportunity to proactively seek out feedback from people that are the quietest people in the room is often, in my experience, one of the most valuable things that you can do, because they've often great thoughts and great insights. They're just waiting to be asked. So I think it's really important to be proactive about it.
A major theme in your comments today has been the importance of relationship building, about how that's something you love to do, how it's something essential to being successful in the customer success space. What advice would you give to people working in customer success roles on how to build really strong, resilient relationships with their clients?
Well, be genuine about it is the first thing. Anyone can see through a disingenuous attempt to build a relationship right from the get-go. So be genuine about it. Find something about that person or that company or whoever it is that genuinely interests you, that you either respect or want to learn more about, or something like that, or just find interesting. And focus on understanding what it is that they want to accomplish, and then see how you can help them with that. At the end of the day, everyone wants to be successful. The whole thing with customer success is that you succeed by helping others succeed. So if I want to build a relationship with someone, whether it's for Catalyst, or for a personal project, or it's just in life, the way I go about doing that is by trying to understand who they are, what their goals are, what their preferences are in terms of either communication and frequency and format, that kind of thing, and then seeing what I can do to help them be successful. I don't focus on just like, I want Scott to like me, so I'm going to tell him a bunch of jokes and I'm going to be friendly and laugh and whatever in our conversations, though I might do that too. I'm going to want to know, what you are specifically looking to achieve, and then I'm going to think about how I can help you with that, and then I'm going to genuinely try to do it because I know that that's the foundation of a strong relationship.
It's great advice, and I think that relevant beyond customer success, but also to life
Yes.
in general. And one of the things before we started recording, I talked about how I've listened to a lot of Ben's podcast episodes through Catalyst, and which I think are fantastic. And I noticed that that's a running kind of theme throughout a lot of your episodes, Ben, which is that kind of exploring how to build relationships with people. Obviously, the podcast is kind of focused on customer success, but in many ways, it has a broader, I would say, mandate, which I think is fantastic. So, on the topic of your podcast, for our listeners, if they want to check out or learn more about your podcast, what's an episode or episodes you in particular recommend that they listen to?
So I didn't mention this before in CS metrics, but we have a CS metric called NPS, or Net Promoter Score. So the podcast is called NPS I Love You. We had to go for some sort of pun. And an episode I would recommend checking out, there's a lot of great ones. I would recommend, especially if you're into customer success, check out Christy Felterusso. It's called the Real Housewives of Customer Success is the title of her episode. She's someone you should follow on every social media channel. She puts out an incredible amount of customer success content. She's the VP of customer success at IntelliShift, but she's just a load of fun. We laughed our way through it, and she imparted a lot of great advice, but it's also it's a fun listen. So I would check that one out.
I like your creativity of titles throughout podcast. Definitely
running theme in my life. Like university, just you have me thinking about that, but I would sit for an hour and a half to come up with a catchy title for my term paper before I would actually write the term paper. So it's definitely important.
I can relate a little bit. I remember in high school, I was very active in competitive debating, and
Hmm.
you have to name points for it. Now, we have lost, often it'd be only 15 minutes to prepare, but I remember sometimes sending like 2 minutes just to be like, okay, what's the catchy name for this
Yeah,
this point?
it makes a big
And
difference.
it does. It makes a lot. I wasn't particularly good at it. My debating partner, I would often lean on his advice, but creating very alliterative. I remember we were perhaps not the most creative, but very alliterative point names
Yeah,
was a good way to grab people's attention.
100%.
One thing that has always impressed me, Ben, and I think has been something that have made you stand out amongst different Venture for Canada fellows, is your ability to manage many different kind of projects at once. So you have your full time job, but also you'll do a lot of different kind of side hustles or other kind of ventures at the same time. What advice would you give to somebody who is just starting, let's say, a side hustle? And for background listeners, a side hustle is something you're doing concurrently while being still full time employed. Working 40+ hours a week at a job. So yeah, what advice would you give to somebody who is looking to launch a side hustle?
Make sure it's something that you really enjoy doing, or something you're really passionate about. It could be a great product market fit. You might have something where it could generate a lot of money. But if you don't really love doing it, you're just not going to have that motivation, because you're going to be so exhausted from doing your day job that when it comes to putting in those hours on the evenings and weekends, you're just going to be burnt out and you won't do a great job with it, or you won't stick with it. Um, yeah, so I mean, that's why, I mean, the key example, like I started CS and Focus. That was, to me, felt like play. Like I was just organizing events. It was all volunteer, it was a nonprofit, but so we still made money, but it all went back into the company. But we were organizing events, putting out resources, stuff like that, and it was just fun for me. And I knew it was also helping my career and that sort of thing. Versus 2 years ago, I tried to start a marketplace software that was called Assembly. And I still think it's an amazing product that could make a lot of money. And one day I might actually do it. But what happened was I got to the point where I had a very large company in Toronto that was ready to pilot it. If I built it, they had basically agreed to that. And I had investors that were willing to back it if I executed that pilot. And I was looking at sort of this roadmap of work in front of me, and I knew what it would take to do. And I just didn't have it in me. I was like, I don't want to spend, I know exactly how, like, this will consume everything, and I'll have to drop all these other projects. I won't be able to, work with my partner in his photography business. I won't be able to put in as much time at work. I won't be able to keep going with CS and Focus. I would need to be day job and this and nothing else. And it just, to me, was not worth the trade-off. So that was a big lesson for me in terms of how to think about what I take on outside of my day job.
Yeah, there's only so many hours in the day that at a certain point something has to give. My grandfather, who is a quite successful entrepreneur and almost 90, and who's done a lot of stuff in his life. One thing he told me recently is he was reflecting on kind of his life. He says, "You can't do everything, Scott, and
Yeah.
don't try." And I was like, that is wise wisdom by a 90-year-old that I will I think is good to reflect. And I think particularly as someone at the end of his 20s, but still in my 20s myself, it's something I reflect on.
Yeah.
Sometimes I want to do. We live in a very FOMO, fear of missing out culture, so
Sure.
it can be it can be tough. So one of your other side hustles is we're on the founding team of Venture Out, which is the first and largest tech and social impact non-for-profit organization connecting LGBT plus people in tech to career opportunities, mentorship, and each other. What advice would you give to startups on how to be inclusive to all employees, but I guess in particular, and given the context of Venture Out, to members of the LGBT plus community?
Yeah, so I mean, first, huge shout out to Jeanette Stock for bringing me into that. She was the chief founder of that whole project, and it was awesome getting to work with her, and she's a fellow in the 2016 cohort. The I mean, what I'd say to employers, I think actually uh, and what you said there is sort of the point I wanted to make on that, which is it's not about, I wouldn't say that there's anything specific that employers should do to build inclusive spaces that are inclusive of LGBTQ people. I think that if you build a culture that's truly inclusive, then it's much more foundational. It can be applied to anybody who has any, let's say, variation or any sort of reason to ever feel othered. And if you build that, then no matter what comes along, then you're always equipped to handle it and support the team. In my mind, all the kind of cliche things are more lip service recruiting. It's great. Like if you want to hire a drag queen for an entertainment during Pride, or you want to march in the parade, great. Like those are definitely positive things that you can do to show support. But I don't think, I would say in terms of building an inclusive space, I don't think that I would bundle in with those. I think an inclusive space to me just means a space where you feel completely safe and comfortable being your genuine self at work. And I think that applies to all people. I think everyone has, needs to feel that way. And I think that the advice I would give, hire HR earlier than you think. Hire your people person as soon as you can afford them, because I've seen that kill a company. I mean, we had a company last year in Toronto, major fintech startup, that because of the way that an issue was handled, their investment got pulled and the company went bankrupt, and in a day or 2 days or something like that. So mitigate those risks early on, build an inclusive culture by hiring an expert in that, a people person, an HR person right from the start, and build it from the ground up over time. And that'll just pay dividends down the road.
It's great advice. And I think I've seen that in Venture Canada and all the different companies we work with is the importance of investing in HR early on, and not just getting any HR person, but getting a really good HR person.
Yes.
Is important. I think that there's sometimes in technology startups, there's actually a shortage, I think, of really skilled people leaders. And I think one of the things an opportunity in the Canadian ecosystem is how to continue to develop strategic people leaders, where often I think when people think of HR, they think of, oh, that's the person who gets my T4, or that's the person who does the vacation booking, or that thing. And it's transforming it from it's not an administrative person who's like an assistant, but that this is a really important senior executive strategic role that has a huge potential positive impact on your company's bottom line, and also just being a good place to work.
Yeah.
And so I think your comments are super important. And the second point that resonates is, I think, that importance of intersectional inclusion, of how do you build a workplace that is inclusive to everybody, kind of regardless of background, recognizing that it's an ongoing kind of journey. But I think that's very kind of helpful kind of comments. One thing Venture Canada we're always fascinated on is thinking around advice, and what advice people would give themselves, the younger versions of themselves. So a question I have for you, Ben, is if you could go back in time and you could give advice to your 22-year-old self, what would you say and why?
So much. Buy GameStop on January 31st. Buy a lot of GameStop stock. If I could go to that point, I would say, I think the biggest transformation that it took me way longer than it should have to figure out that I would advise is culturally we're really taught to, and I would say even universities do this, we're taught to compensate, we're taught to focus on our weaknesses and build them up into strengths. And so we devote a lot of resources to saying, okay, I'm good at presentations and I'm good at being creative and coming up with funny names for things I do. You know what? I'm not good at accounting. I'm not good at writing code. I'm not good at, X, Y, or Z. So that's where I'm going to focus my time to level up those skills to make me this really strong, versatile person. But what I've learned is that you become incredibly more valuable to companies and yourself and the economy in general if you instead focus all that energy on doubling down on what you're already good at. Instead of being naturally good at presentations, focus on being the best presenter that you could ever possibly be. If you're good at, creative problem solving, or if you're good at marketing, you're good at these things, double down on those instead of focusing on the things that you aren't good at, because then you end up pretty good at 50 things or 100 things or whatever, instead of extremely good at a small set of things. And companies don't want to hire a bunch of people that are pretty good at a lot of things. They want to put together a team where they feel like they're putting together the Avengers, where they each have their own specific specialty, except for Scarlett Johansson, who serves no purpose, but they each have their own specific specialty, and they're putting together this dream team of talented people that when they come together, they can create the most amazing product and team and grow. And so if you really want to accelerate your career and do really well and be promoted, that kind of thing, really double down on the things that you already have a natural inclination towards, and don't spend time focusing on the things that you're not good at.
That's advice that really resonates to me. And coincidentally, I've actually been doing a lot of research on this topic. And a few points. The first off is that statistically across the population, a lot of studies have been done, which just shows that people think they can improve their weaknesses more than their strengths, even though it's scientifically proven, to your point, that your strengths are actually what you can kind of amplify. So that's the first point. Second is that it's important to think around, I think, managing one's weaknesses, not necessarily improving them. So,
yes,
it's to the extent to which, how can I remove myself from situations that I don't need to do, these things that I'm weak at, or and how can I have other people do them? And you hear that, I've heard that so much from different successful entrepreneurs, where they say, okay, well, I hire people to do that, I'm not good at it, so
right.
I'm outsourcing it. But also just even in someone's career, if you're not an entrepreneur, going into kinds of roles where you're not going to do things frequently that you're weak at. Now, if it's something around certain attention to detail, for instance, which is probably valuable in most jobs, at a certain point, if someone says, "Oh, I'm just not good at attention to detail," well, then somebody needs to get it up to a certain level. So to the point about managing, right, that weakness. But it's really it's doubling down on the strength.
I love that you brought that up, because that's literally, that was the other piece I was going to say. So I am always super upfront that I am not extremely detail oriented. And so I really value having a colleague who can proof my work before it gets sent out, who can lean over my shoulder, or if I forget something or whatever, that can point it out for me. And there are people who have like a very natural detail orientation. And I love those people because they compensate for my weaknesses. And even when I was interviewing at Catalyst, I was very honest, like that is my weakness. Like I'm not the most detail oriented person. I'm great at getting shit done, but it might not be perfect. So give me someone to work with who is good at that. And that kind of leads into another kind of stemming off that piece of advice, which is you're going to be, if you're applying to these early stage startups and you're 18, 19, or you're just coming out of school, you're going to be asked what your biggest weaknesses are. And the surest way to lose points is to give a cop-out answer, like I care too much, or I work too hard, or blah, blah, blah. Be honest about what your strengths and what your weaknesses are. And they will love that, because then you're helping the company figure out where you'll fit in. Because maybe you have a really strong skill here and a weak skill here, but they know they have someone where their strength is your weakness. And so they know you'll work really well together. So lean into that, be honest about it. That'll win you so many points.
Recent grads, take note. Working too hard is not a weakness to say, right? Or I care too much is not a weakness. Very common answer that I hear. It is often a humble brag and not a good answer to say. To Ben's point, one tool that I recommend, two tools. So Ben recommended one thing before, which I suggest people check out, is Gallup has a tool called Strength Finders, which you can use, and there's varying opinions about it, but it's probably the most common kind of strength finder. There's another great exercise, which I actually prefer, called Reflect Your Best Self, which in essence, what you do is you get 11 to 12 people who you know well. So that's family members, colleagues, sort of friends, kind of the top 12 people you know in your life. and you get them to not tell you verbally, but you send them an email, say, when I am at my best, I do this, and you get them to email you the advice, the sort of the 12, and then you compile it into one kind of document, and you begin to look at the different kind of like trends. And then you sort of begin to say, okay, well, this is kind of people's perceptions of what kind of strength. And there's other kind of tools and mechanisms, but I think, to your point, Ben, is I think it's absolutely important to double down on strengths. And I think the first step of that is really reflecting on what are your strengths. And we all have blind spots. And I think the only way we understand really what our strengths are is actually by talking to people who know us the best and kind of getting their input.
Definitely. Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's only through other things that other people have said or written or told me that I was able to figure out what my strengths were, because we have a tendency just as people to like discount what we're good at. We devalue it because it comes easily to us, but what comes easily to us doesn't come easily to the next person. So it's only through other people's eyes that we can understand that. So I think it's an awesome exercise.
I'm glad you're a fan of it as well. My final question before we end off the podcast is, if there are 2 or 3 books that you recommend our listeners check out, what are they and why do you recommend them?
Okay, I wrote 3 down because I couldn't decide. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss negotiation is one of the most important life skills that nobody will ever teach you. So never split the difference. Read it, apply it, practice it. It has gotten me upgraded on flights. It's gotten me discounts on things. It's gotten me better salaries. Read the book. The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided Over Politics and Religion. That's by Jonathan Haidt. Just a really good book to help you be more empathetic and understand people and what's going on around us. The book is a few years old, but it's more applicable now than ever for obvious reasons. So definitely recommend that one. And the last one is a little more like the cynic in me, but it's called Winners Take All, The Elite Charade of Changing the World by Anand Giridharadas, if I'm saying his last name right. Really eye-opening to kind of this illusion of philanthropy that all these wealthy and successful people do, where it's really structured around how they only engage in it to maintain the status quo and to essentially keep themselves in power. So it's a really interesting kind of eye-opening book that I recommend if that's more your speed.
I agree. Winners Take All is a fantastic book. My favorite book, I think I read, 2018, I remember when I read it. It is fantastic. He's also amazing on Twitter, the author of that book. He did a great job. When we're taping this today, it was just yesterday that Jeff Bezos announced he was retiring as CEO of Amazon. And Anand was doing a very good job of kind of trolling Jeff Bezos. Because a lot of people say, oh, now Jeff Bezos can save the world through philanthropy. And he's like, well, do I have a good book for you? I think it does a really good job of, running a charity, myself and being involved in the philanthropic sector. It made me reflect as well, I think, on the way that sometimes philanthropy can reinforce existing systems and can actually be really risk averse and not actually solve things. And the second, I haven't read that book by Jonathan Haidt, but I have read another book that he wrote called The Coddling of the American Mind.
It's a good one too.
It is an excellent book, very relevant, I think. Though I do not necessarily agree with every single comment, and it is I would say a little bit of a controversial book, but I think it's an important one for people to read and to understand. And I've heard great things about his other book as well. So on that closing, thanks for this very informative conversation, Ben. A lot of great learnings on everything from customer success, career development, relationship building, book advice, managing side hustles, inclusion and diversity. We covered it all today. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me and for all you're doing in the space. It's awesome stuff.
And one final question is, where can our listeners go to find and learn more about you and your work?
I mean, you can have me on LinkedIn. I post on there a lot. I'm happy to connect with fellows, but definitely check out just the community section on Catalyst. You can follow me on Twitter as well. And I'm always happy to connect. So check it out and join the customer success movement.
That's it for this week's episode of A New Wave of Entrepreneurship. Stay connected with us via our social and our email list. Subscribe in your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss our next episode. If you have feedback on today's episode, tweet us at Venture4Canada, that is Venture, the number 4, Canada, or email us at podcast@venture4, that's spelled FOR, Canada.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. I'm Scott Sturt, and until next time, stay safe, stay motivated, and stay grateful. A New Wave of Entrepreneurship is produced by Juanita Lee Garcia and Latifa Farah. Editing and mixing also done by Latifa Farah. Erica Ormiston is our editorial assistant. Mark Wallach and Premium Beat own the copyright and publishing rights related to the song used in this podcast. The comments and opinions, recommendations, or suggestions expressed on the podcast by the guests are not liable to Venture for Canada and belong solely to each individual. Any information provided stated by our guests and our host is independent of Venture for Canada. A New Wave of Entrepreneurship is a Venture for Canada brand, and all content is owned by Venture for Canada. If you'd like to use our content, please reach out to us at podcast@venture4, that's spelled FOR, Canada.ca.